On this episode of AV Week, Samsung speaks Greek, Google says it takes a village, and lighting goes for purple haze. This and more on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 307, Tertiary AV.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Extron Electronics and by Chief, the global leader in commercial AV mounting solutions.
And welcome to another edition of AV Week, your source for news and information in the AV integration industry. I'm your host, George Tucker. Thank you for joining us. Today, we've got a host of stories, and to help me get through them are some illustrious panelists. First, but not least, of course, is Josh Srago. How are you, sir?
Doing well. It's been an interesting week. Lots of funny things going on in the tech world from my world.
Not funny, haha, though.
I laugh at it, but I'm evil and maniacal, so what do you want?
Yeah, there you go. Joining us also is the one and only Mr. Dave Hatz. How are you, sir?
Hey, doing awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, been a while. I haven't seen you since Infocom.
It has been.
Yeah. I don't remember much of Infocom, but that's another story entirely. All right, and also the one and the only Mr. Phillip Cordell. How are you, sir?
Hey, George. Great, man. Glad to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
All right, cool. All right, well, this seems to be the era and the weeks, or the months at least, of mergers and acquisitions. We had a lot going on in the last few months. People buying people, things happening. And again, one of our good friends, Samsung, has quietly acquired another company. Yes, indeed. Samsung has acquired the Greek-based text-to-speech startup. I think you pronounce that Innoetics? This is a speech-to-text system that actually works best in taking any speech and then being able to reproduce it. One of its better qualities, though, is that it can also do not just English, but Greek, of course, because it's based out of Greek, and languages like Hindi. It's a very interesting concept, to say the least. All right, so let me start with you, Dave. There's a lot of movement in the speech control arena, and everyone wanting to get on board with their own sort of version of Echo. Samsung acquiring this with their recent acquisition of Harman and a few other companies. In fact, in 2014, they bought another home control company that does something similar. Do you think that this has a big impact on the AV, or do you think this is just for their car systems?
Well, I mean, at this point, it's hard to tell on something like this because it's really a very niche technology, it seems. But, I mean, there's no doubt that Samsung, they're looking to get in and compete with the Amazon Echoes and the Google Homes. And we know they have the voice control in the car and on their phone handsets and, a number of other areas of technology that don't, directly relate to our commercial AV space. But the piece that I found interesting in here is that this seems like a really solid company that does, they do one piece really well. And that's the speech to tech or speech to, to text in the code, and then the code text back out to speech. And that, that's the tricky part of any of this. I mean, heck, for Samsung to lay down, even though it's not, in the realm of mergers all that much, at only $50 million. But for Samsung to put $50 million down on this company, they obviously have to be doing something right. And, it seems that, this company really has their tech performance well, which, is something that could advance Samsung above others. One of the things that, I really took from this was the multilingual support, where, you see it with Echo. They're slow to move to different markets or different language areas of the world. Here, if Samsung can latch onto that technology, can deploy to more places at the same time, can get quicker entry into certain parts of the market, I think it can only benefit them. And for us, I mean, the first thing that I thought of is, like you said, Samsung and AMX. We have yet to really see any changes in our industry because of that. But if this technology becomes available to AMX, think of the one up on voice integration that they could have natively with their products, as opposed to relying on bringing in and integrating just solely with outside products.
Well, Josh, Dave brings up a couple of good facts about that. This could be a quicker turnaround time in development for voice command products for, say, AMX via Samsung. But it also has a feature that says that it can reproduce basically the voice and speech patterns based on very simple one-time input from an individual. So the turnaround time is even quicker, but we're also less reliant on a sort of human interaction even in that voice command. What do you see that progressing towards, and does that really benefit the integration industry? We can't hear you.
He's dropping knowledge. We can't hear it.
Well,
There you
I'm
go.
at a
You're
higher
back.
level. I'm at a higher plane. What can I say?
Just start from it.
So, of course, this has implications from the commercial industry and in terms of its integration and adoption. People want to be able to walk into a room. They want to have a sense that they're there, or just tell the room what they want it to do. The ease of which that adoption can take place only expedites and only improves as that technology gets better and as that technology becomes holistically a part and partnered with others. So this year at Infocom, one of the biggest highlights of my show was seeing that Harman umbrella kind of come together in product. And now this was before this doesn't incorporate the Samsung purchase. It took 2 years to get the SVSI, AMX, BSS, all of those components to play well together. Now with Samsung involved and everything that they have on the back end, now we're going to start to see more. We're going to see the IoT, because Samsung built its own IoT network for South Korea. That's a massive step forward. And if you can incorporate a speech to text and a text to speech variation of that, you bring voice commands, you bring IoT. Now you're talking sensors. So if you don't have sensors, you have speech, or the sensors trigger a specific speech. So imagine walking into a room, have the room welcome you and say, would you like to start the meeting, as opposed to having to tell, hey room, I'm here, start my meeting. Incorporating all of these devices is the next evolution for that commercial integration, and makes me further want to run to the hills where there is no technology.
Yeah, there is that. Mr. Cordell, I was posed some similar question that I did to Josh, though, that it seems to say that it can take someone's voice, not just bring that to text, but also then replicate that voice in other phrasings and commands or responses.
That's the part.
Yeah, go ahead.
That really stuck out to me as well, that it wasn't just your typical kind of run-of-the-mill thing. Like, this thing can get creepy, I think some of the language specifically, it can listen to a person speaking, train on what the person is saying, and then read out a piece of completely unrelated text in that same voice. And that, quote, their synthesized voices are so accurate you almost can't tell the difference between it and the real voice. And so for me, whether it's Siri or Alexa or whatever, I don't know anybody who sounds quite like they do. There's still a barrier between, the technology and, my hearing of it, and it just kind of keeps me away. It's like, yeah, that's tech, whatever. It's kind of separate. If it doesn't work, no problem. But if I'm telling myself to turn off the lights and I'm not doing it, I'm going to get upset. Just having that kind of interplay. I mean, to me, it speaks to a kind of a larger, future where it's getting a bit more lifelike with the AI,
But there's that perfect point to it where now we can actually talk to ourselves and get the similar response.
Well,
people will never have to be alone again. You can just literally talk to yourself.
Oh my God, is it the new selfie?
And we're so kind of ego-driven that, that's all we really want. Anyway, I just want to hear my beautiful voice talking back to me when I walk into a conference room and say, hey, Phil.
I was just thinking all you need to do is play back this recording of AVWeek, and now we can all have Phil Cordell responding to every one of our commands.
Everything. So yeah, I really, that's where I see the main benefit, because there's so many speech to text and text to speech, companies out there right now doing it, and so many people rolling out new products. But that idea that it sounds like anybody's voice can be Siri's voice. I don't just have to pick from a set option of, Australian male or, British female, that it's like, it sounds like my wife or it sounds like me, really could, I think, aid in the adoption of it, because no longer is it this weirdo tech thing that I'm not comfortable with. It sounds like me.
Well, I want to bring up another topic this really sort of edges on, and no one's brought it up, but there's a whole debate about the guest worker program here in the U.S., especially in technology. And a lot of people have argued that guest worker visas actually is what props up and helped create the Silicon Valley revolution. And that now that we're being a little harsher about that, and the rules and the laws and the acceptance is a little less tolerant, they're all going back and creating these things where they come from. Again, you see the inclusion of Hindi, of Greek, that Amazon, the Echo, and all those other voice command devices never really had. It was either English or some other Germanic or based language. Now this spreading out before us. It was probably in Greek before it was this company, before it was English. So, Dave, I talk to you. Do you see that as a boon or a bane to sort of the expansion of the AV industry, especially as it relates to our U.S.-based or North American-based centric outcast?
Well, I think from our perspective here in the United States, I think we're going to see it as technology from areas outside of Silicon Valley. Really becoming, again, this is a Greek company of 8 to 10 employees. But I think for those overseas, those not in the United States, I think they're the ones who are going to benefit from this because, we were talking about the quicker adoption. Here, if we can, if Samsung can come out with a product that fits the commercial AV space, the international appeal of a single product really is what has the potential to benefit here, rather than products that are more geared towards the Americas or more geared towards the EU or to the Asia Pac. If Samsung can leverage this, become more international, with a single product, I think it can be really beneficial.
All right. Any other comments on that, guys, before we move on to the next story?
I'm moving to France because President Macron is very, very supportive of evolution of tech in France, and there's beautiful food and countrysides and wine and oh wait, I live in California. All those things are here.
What I could see happening with this technology, and where I thought for a moment you were going, with the import or export of tech jobs. I mean, if you're talking tech support, a lot of people gripe that they can't understand the person on the other side of the phone. Whether that's a valid gripe or not, technology like this can make them sound like whoever you want. You may not even be able to tell that that you're talking to somebody on the other side of the world. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that it's great to kill the diversity in tech like that, but it's certainly an option.
Well, there's also the aspect that if it's producing a natural speech pattern, think about Google Voice was one of the reasons that the Google Home sounds a lot more natural is they've been listening to your phone calls on Google Voice and detecting those speech patterns from people for so long. Now apply Watson to that. Now apply an Edge AI. And we keep seeing how IBM is moving this and partnering. And of course, IBM does have a partnership with Harman. So now we start to see Harman, IBM, Samsung, Harman in a partnership with processing, voice detection, and a natural speech replication. So as much as those support jobs are, we hate hearing this and we hate seeing that, if then, setting up that code for if then circumstances in many tech support calls for fundamental layer 1 calls are not that complicated. And literally you could set up a, hey, have you done this? And have it be a natural speech reproduction in an accent they're familiar with. I mean, we've got 4 regions of the country responding at this point. We have the Southeast, we have the Northwest, we have the Northeast, we have the Pacific, and we have the Central. So we are all speaking with slightly different tonalities, slightly different actions. And if it can respond naturally based on what it hears, that provides a value of replacing tech support at a lower tier level.
Well, even think about this. If that, you call in for tech support and the first thing it does is ask you your name, and based on the speech pattern and the way you say your name, it at least funnels you closer to a dialect and the accent and the voice pattern that you are going to be more familiar with based on not necessarily matching your voice specific, but the type of voice.
Is it plugged in, Phillip? Oh, no. Does it need to be? I didn't know it needed to be. Yeah. That's how most of my tech support calls will go.
Well, let me ask a quick question here, because there was another story that we were going to sort of leave to the end if we had time, but I think it's relevant here. From our friends at Gadget 360, there is the purchase by our friends at Google of Halli Labs, a 4-month-old, I'm not even going to try to say that, based AI startup was acquired by Google. Now, this is a company that does AI, and it's a brand new. It's done by some former Google people, as we spoke about earlier. They're all sort of moving back and doing what they want to do at home. My question to you guys, and I'll start with Josh, is AI valuable to us in the integration industry, or is it a threat? It kind of is in that razor's edge, is it not?
It can be. It can be a threat to that, but at the same time, it depends on the application and the instance. And so the idea that we want these machines to be learning, we want these machines to be operating, but there's still the integration aspect of it has to be, having that liaison, be it an integrator, be it a consultant, be it some form of expert that understands all aspects of the circle of technology that has to go to incorporate this. So you get the minds like ours and like other people in this industry who are sitting there going, okay, well, this manufacturer does this thing well and they do this thing well. How do we make those two things talk to one another in order to create a solution to do this? How do we partner these solutions? And so, or if this manufacturer does X, Y, Z, and I want them to do A, B, C as well, and they do A and B, when is C going to come? And how do we get those evolutions? Will it come through acquisition or not? And with AI, it becomes a matter of understanding how these rooms are utilized. So think about that in terms of a building management system that we already deploy. We have half a dozen of them that we utilize in this industry on a daily basis. And if we can understand how people are utilizing these systems and utilizing these rooms, and we can monetize that both for our benefit as a service as well as expand that out, we're now reaching a point where we can be more advisory going forward and dictate the requirements, say to an architect or say to a client themselves, and say, you're not giving yourself enough space. You're not giving yourself enough resources in order to do the business that you want to do based on companies of similar size and similar activity. And so we can help them become more efficient, prove our value to it. So it's whether or not we see it as a tool that we can use or whether or not we see it as an enemy that we have to fight against and say, well, it's never going to be as good as what we can provide you. And that's the dangerous thing, because AI is bright, shiny, and it makes people's homes really fun. And they want that in their workplace because it's something that they're familiar with. And it means that the ease of interaction and ease of adoption goes faster because they just have to give it quick commands that they're familiar with. And that line, once we cross that line, if we aren't ready to adopt that and incorporate it as a service as to how we deploy and how we provide resources and value, that's where it becomes the danger to us.
Phillip, Josh mentions that it's could lead to easier adaptation or adoption by people, but it all because it can learn, because it can actually do what we want it to do without having to tell it explicitly what to do each time. Isn't that really the programmer's position in developing the software for our control systems? Does this pose a existential threat to that side of it? I mean, are we looking at the end of programming, as some of those shows have questioned?
Yeah, that's a great question. I certainly hope not. Oftentimes people use a system and then a month or 2 months or 3 months later, they wish it operated in a slightly different way. I'm not a huge fan of gigging people for that every time anyway. So, I think there's always going to be the need for a programmer to come in, set up your code, and let it go from there. Sure, future life is our whole industry, or programming specifically, in jeopardy because of AI? Yes, but no more so than every other industry in the world. We're all open to robots taking our jobs. So, what do you do? I was more intrigued by the quote old problems that they said the AI was working on to fix, but they never said what those old problems were. Did you guys notice that? I was like, what are they? Or was this? What do I do if my horse kicks a shoe off, or if my Crestron viewport won't connect? Like, I don't know what old problems they're trying to solve, and they never told me. So let's get to the bottom of that.
Maybe it's paying somebody to do something. Yeah, that's the old problem.
That's the old way to do it.
The age-old problem. Yeah, there you go. Hey, Dave. So we talked about efficiency. We talked about that it can learn and that there might be an existential threat to some parts of the industry. But I wonder if you see this adaptation of AI being something that would create a more diverse and a more diverse and open type of new architecture, or if it just really would force a standardization because it sees the easiest path as being the one simple command that everybody does.
Well, I think a lot of that depends on us. It depends on how much we take the technology and sort of what Josh was saying, embrace it and become the liaison between our end users, our clients, and like helping drive direction of the ways that this can be beneficial, the ways this can make life easier. If we take it, I really believe if we embrace it and we help drive new directions where this can be beneficial, where we can use this, where we can bring value to our clients, I think we have the potential to make this something that's really valuable to everyone. At the same time, if we don't, and we leave it to Google, to Apple, to Microsoft, to Samsung, pick your poison. If we leave it to them to decide what is easiest for them to package in a universally fitting box, well, then we're going to be at the mercy of what they decide. And typically that's going to mean less features, more, call it a standard, but it's smaller feature set from our perspective, but it's something that they can mass produce. So it's got the potential to go either way. Certainly, as a programmer and engineer at heart, I want to have the flexibility to take the good from all these options and integrate them into the most awesome product I can for my customers.
All right. Well, let's move on to another topic that, actually piggybacks off of Dave's idea about more quality for our customers. From our friends at EE Times, there is about purple emitting LEDs. Now, why is that important? Well, they want to get closer to the natural sun spectrum, or the natural CRI of sunlight. The reason I bring this up is that, one, of course, it's purple LEDs. How cool can you get? They must look fantastic. But also because we, in the integration side, maybe we're not so aware of the idea that maybe we think we program the lights, maybe we make the presets, but the quality of light and how it affects our workforce or the homeowners in the residential side really is important. And when it comes down to it, they're not going to blame the guy who put the fixture in. They're going to blame the guy who they last saw setting up their interface. So, Josh, to you, I'm going to start this conversation off. One, do you think this purple LED thing is a solution? And what are your thoughts on the idea that understanding what light does to our clients and how we operate within it, how important is that to what we do as an industry?
You're just starting with me because there's purple over my shoulder, aren't you? Honestly, this is this very, very massive jump forward. One of the things that we've talked about at the IoT Insights, and I believe it was Richard Blackwell that actually brought it up, we've talked about the idea that in a hospital environment, because don't think of this in terms of LED as an LED wall. Think of this as a lighting solution and the mood alterations that you can have by adjusting lighting. And if you create a more natural environment, I mean, I'm sitting under, as you can see, a flood of fluorescent light up above me. And basically, if you're watching the show, that is, but there's, fluorescent. You're getting those peaks and you're getting those valleys, and it's a lot harsher. And it's been demonstrated that it's strenuous. But to create an LED that is able to produce that more even spectrum of daylight gives you more flexibility in color alterations. And one of the applications that this came up for that was really huge was in hospitals. Where you're trying to manipulate mentality and healing and positivity. And so being able to have a wider spectrum of color to be able to manipulate and create that daylight to bring in that environment, because, we always talk about the winter doldrums and all those grays outside. But if you can create and simulate that environment internally, how is that going to affect production across environments in those months, or in Seattle or in San Francisco, where it's often gray just due to weather conditions of the environment? This is a massive move forward in terms of that. I mean, it's just a matter of whether or not it's cost effective, whether or not it can be widely deployed, widely replicated. All of those things still need to be established. But as a fundamental step forward, this is very significant as it applies to humans and their application with artificial lighting.
Dave, you've taught the CTS prep course at times, and I know it may not have been on some of this topic, but as an industry, we don't recognize lighting. We know we want to get in on it, we want to control it, but we're not often on that design end. I mean, how big of a gap do you think we have in the education of integrators that just like heating and cooling, this has to be something we understand? Like understanding circadian rhythms now becomes something that needs to be in that AV handbook prep course, no?
It is. It is. I mean, like you said, the gap is, Josh just motioned it, and he's spot on. There's a huge gap. If we're lucky, somebody will actually consider the light output of a room versus the light, the brightness of the projector that they really need in a space. But honestly, that's even a real big stretch for many of the systems that are deployed. That we just really, it's like audio's relationship to video, where video rules and audio is a second thought, an afterthought. Well, lighting, it's way down the hall behind audio in terms of being an afterthought. And it's something that we really do need to embrace and understand, because again, when we look at what value as an industry can we bring to our clients, we're not just selling them boxes of a control processor, a touch screen, a video switcher, and a loudspeaker anymore. We're providing services for them. And one of the services that can really bring tangible outcome to their environments is getting the lighting right. It's creating that better atmosphere for their employees, for their clients, for their users. And we as an industry, in order to provide that service, certainly we need to look at the education of it. We need to look at our own understanding of it. And then we need to put into practice what we preach. And all of those things, we certainly have room to improve on.
Phil, so just how important can we make it? I mean, I wonder about, the first thing that comes to my mind is purple haze, but how do we train our people to understand that our environment is no longer just AV, and that we need to be able to control and respond to our clients' needs about environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's all about training. It's all about getting people just comfortable with that idea, and out of the niche of selling the same box, the same conference room setup that they've always sold, or the same training room setup that they've always spec'd and sold, and taking those larger things into consideration. I agree. It's kind of there for us if we want to step into it, but it's just getting people out of their molds. Now, we've kind of been shaken out of a lot of our old ways just because of the way that the industry has been working and has been moving. But this is an opportunity for us to kind of reach into something that's tangential to what we do and kind of bring it in and become, thought experts on this field as well. And so I think, it's an excellent opportunity for us as an industry to step in there and really do something cool with it. Like so many awesome technologies, I don't know how many people will fork out the extra money, how many people will appreciate the psychological benefits of purple lights, and the effect that it could have, or, more closely approximating actual light. Most office buildings that I step into or we're doing commercial AV installations still have just, same as Josh said, same as I do, just fluorescent lights hanging overhead, and so you really have to be invested in that kind of next level thought field to want to invest in it. But I think there are those companies out there that, could match the resources to a good idea, and it's up to us to sell it. So if we can get educated on it enough to get out there and sell it, we could do some really cool stuff.
I think there's a greater ease of adoption when you're looking at the design side of the world, just simply because you're into the project a lot faster and a lot sooner. And if you're able to offer those, and I mean, this is something that we at TCOM really believed in, with integration of telecom, security, acoustics, Wi-Fi, DAS, and all of the different low voltage technologies that we specify and work with architects and general contractors to do. This is the next one in line. It's the, okay, let's show you how, because the thing is, the other thing to keep in mind is these systems are going on networks. If it's a network solution and you're deploying a telecom solution and you're designing the networks and you're designing the backbone and the core and shell of the building, why wouldn't you add the next appliance? And slowly but surely, as you get to that as you consider these things less a lighting system, an AV system, but a network appliance, it becomes a much more easy thought process. But we have to change our mentality. We have to get architects to change their mentality. Electrical contractors have to change their mentality. Everybody that goes across this has to change the mentality in terms of how they look at it as not being an isolated vertical or market, but as a specific network appliance.
That's well said. All right, with that, we're going to wrap up. But before we wrap up, I want to ask a couple of questions about the FCC lately. As you know, this week, the FCC was having a big debate about net neutrality. July 12th was the Network or Net Neutrality Awareness Day, or whatever it was called. I can't remember. But I want a quick question from you, or a quick answer from you guys. I'll start with you, Phil. The question at hand is, if the FCC decides to kibosh net neutrality, what effect do you think this will have on the AV integration industry?
Could have a huge effect on us. The potential is certainly there, as it is for a lot of industries that have networked appliances that need to talk over the internet. So it could be big, but hard to say.
Dave, Phil says that it could have an effect on our network appliances. What do you see and forecast that if they're allowed to just charge the rates they want to charge, where do we go with that?
Well, think of your Amazon Echo. If you don't pay the fee, you might get a response someday. If you pay the fee, you get your response right away.
And Josh, 30 seconds, your thoughts on where that goes to the AV industry and how we come around it.
First and foremost, Dave's example is not applicable because it is not an internet accessible device from from everywhere. Therefore, it is not applicable or covered by net neutrality regulations. Secondly, what will exactly happen is that this will be rolled back due to the fact that they have fully populated the FCC and now have a Republican majority in the place. You will get a roughly 20 to 35 lawsuits that will come back. It will go to the DC District Court of Appeals, and the FCC will have the onus to prove that the original regulations were not applicable anymore. And thus we will be caught in this lawsuit for the next 2 to 5 years. And so nothing will change for the next 2 to 5 years. But if they roll back on this, it will have a greater impact on consumers than it will on the AV industry due to how these things are actually applied and due to the evolution that more and more services are softwares, which are accessible from a significant internet endpoints.
And well under time. So what you're saying is it's not as bad as the white space debacle.
Correct.
All right. Well, guys, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank our guests for participating and giving us their thoughts. First and foremost, of course, Josh Srago. Tell us where you can find you, sir.
You can always find me on Twitter at JSRAGO. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've been posting a little bit more on there these days, and I'm still trying to get back into my pure writing form, and I hope to do that while I'm sitting in the Bahamas in a couple of weeks on vacation. So, few articles are pending, few articles are in the works, and you'll probably find those either on soundreason.org, at avnation.tv, that's avnation.tv, or you will find them potentially in a couple of publications that I'm speaking with about some opportunities.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Dave Hatz, how can they find more about you and get in touch?
Well, first, it's more important to go to avisystems.com than to find me, avisystems.com. If you do want to follow me, at Dave Hatz AVI on Twitter. I'm hanging out there from time to time.
All right. And, of course, Mr. Phillip Cordell, where can we find out more about you, your goings-on, and the company?
Yeah, of course, Ben. You can find me on Twitter at _AV_pro. You can find me on YouTube, /High Fidelity, HIPHIDELITY. Of course, you can find out all about my cool company, M3 Technology Group, on Twitter or on our website, m3techgroup.com. And, just doing the things that we do. Thanks so much for having me, man.
All right. Well, again, to everyone watching and listening in, thank you for supporting AVNation.tv. We are also supported by our underwriters. I would appreciate, and I'm sure they would too, they would go to their website and say thank you for supporting us. They make this all possible and that we can keep the lights on. So check it out again at avnation.tv. You'll find this and many more shows on the AV industry verticals. I'm sure you'll find them entertaining. For AVNation and our host, I'm George Tucker saying thank you and good day.